Well, it looks like the Nashville Predators are safely in the playoffs this year, so that begs the question, which team would you rather see them face in the first round? That's a discussion we'll have on today's Locked On Predators podcast.
Your Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On Predators podcast your first listen of the day every single day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I want to start out with a special shout out to our loyal Locked On Pred heads out there, the everydayers who tune into every single show. We love you guys, and we appreciate the support you give us week in and week out. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer at Penalty Box Radio. I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at Penalty Box Radio.
We have a big show today. Nashville Predators taking on the Vegas Golden Knights. That is absolutely a game with a lot at stake. Of course, remember, it was the Vegas Golden Knights a couple of weeks ago. That game that turned things around for the Nashville Predators. I'm kind of wondering if there's some, I don't know, Luke Bryan concert in Nashville that Vegas had to cancel to get themselves back on track.
That's right.
Either way, a big game for Nashville tonight. One that is incredibly important to put distance between them and the rest of the pack. We also are going to talk about the challenges of this 17-game point streak, because it's not always sunshine and rainbows. Maybe there's a little bit more pressure on you now. Maybe teams are looking at you a little bit different than they would have if you were, let's say, middle of the pack right now. So there's definitely difference in the way that the Nashville Predators have to prepare in the middle of this run. That's a conversation we'll have. And of course, as we talked about at the top of the show, which team would you rather face in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs if you're the Nashville Predators? All of that coming up on today's show, but first, want to mention it is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. All right, Ann, let's talk about the teams the Nashville Predators could potentially face in the first round of the playoffs. So, the way it stands right now is they are in the first wild card spot ahead of the Vegas Golden Knights by 5 points. They can extend that lead with a win tonight. They are in, as it stands right now, they would play Colorado in the first round. But the top of the West is such a cluster, Ann.
Yes.
Because you have Vancouver, the President's Trophy leaders right now, with 98 points, first in the Pacific Division. Colorado is second in the West with 97 points, but they're also tied with the Dallas Stars, who have 97 points. There's also the possibility of, the Nashville Predators could leapfrog the Winnipeg Jets and get into, the top three in the Central Division. So there's a lot of possibilities at the table here, and it seems like it's Colorado, Dallas, or Vancouver that are going to be the team that Nashville gets in the first round. So if you are a Preds fan, who are you hoping to see the Nashville Predators match up with in round one?
This is such a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, there is something about each of these teams that I think, I want to see the Predators take a shot at this team. On the other hand, there is also something about each of these teams that is a little bit terrifying when you talk about the playoffs. If I was forced to make a choice right now, I would probably go with Dallas, believe it or not. I would probably go with Dallas for a couple of reasons. One, I'm just not sure goaltending is where they would want it to be, maybe for the postseason. But the flip side of that is, Dallas, I think they have 620 plus goal scorers on their team. So, it's a very stacked roster. But wouldn't it just feel good to get Dallas in the first round, especially after that 9-2 loss, to get Dallas in the first round and to beat them in the first round? Like, a huge challenge right out of the gate. But I do feel like they're a little bit of a moody team, and maybe Nashville could come away with something if they face Dallas. I don't know. What's your take on Preds Dallas?
Preds Dallas is an interesting one because it feels
Mhm.
like the Stars live and die on Jake Ottinger, right?
Yes.
And look, as hot as Colorado is, because I think everybody's answer may be anybody but Colorado at this point. Dallas is pretty hot too. 8-2
They
in
are.
their last 10. They've won 4 straight going into tonight's action. It's interesting because they have a lot of good pieces. Jason Robertson is just as hot as he's been the past couple of years. Matt Duchene, all of a sudden,
All of a sudden,
62 points this season, including 24 goals. I think we're used to him. There's other players that have maybe not, I don't want to say like dropped off or haven't lived up to expectations, but maybe not quite where they've been the past couple of years. Rupe Hintz is one of them. Joe Pavelski feels like stats not quite there as they've been in the past couple of years. And really, it's this season has kind of lived and died on Jake Ottinger, and because when Ottinger is playing well, the Stars look unbeatable. Like they
right.
look as good as any other team in the NHL. They look like the cup contenders that we kind of thought they would be going into the season. But when he's bad, and he's been bad a lot this year, and 898 save percentage,
Yeah.
that's when the Dallas Stars look a little bit shaky. And look, Scott Wedgwood has played all right as the backup this year, but that's kind of the catch-22 for the Dallas Stars is which version of their goaltending is going to show up for them in the playoffs. Because if they get into a battle in which it's maybe goalie versus goalie,
I like our
you
odds.
gotta like UC Saros's odds at this point, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with you. I think a lot of that series would come down to goaltending. And if you look at the tandems, you mentioned Scott Wedgwood, he's not been terrible. He's had 26 games. He's got a 902 save percentage. But friends, I would take Saros Lankinen over Ottinger Wedgwood any day of the week and twice on Sundays. So I think there is an advantage for Nashville there. I also think there is just kind of that emotional drive versus Dallas that would be there. I think there's a little bit of that with Colorado as well. Maybe not quite as much with Vancouver. I don't think they have quite as much past history with Vancouver. But I do think just for pure like middle school petty get them back for that 9-2 loss, I just think that would just be amazing. So much too, I think, is about peaking at the right time. It looks like maybe Dallas is peaking at the right time. So that's something to be kind of mindful of as well. Like, gosh, they really are kind of finding their role.
Yeah. Speaking of the Colorado Avalanche, Anne, that's, I think, the one that maybe everybody is kind of being like, uh-oh. Because they've won 9 straight.
Yep.
Nathan MacKinnon has the wildest under the radar kind of streak going right now, has scored in every single home game this season.
Isn't that
33
crazy?
consecutive home games with a point.
Crazy.
It is, I believe, the second or the third longest streak ever, or the longest in a very, very long time. I think only Wayne Gretzky had longer streaks. So we are at a point where the Colorado Avalanche starting to look a little bit unbeatable right now. And they just seem to be getting better. I think they had a really good trade deadline. The moves felt like that kind of maybe pushed him over the top a little bit. There's talk that Gabriel Landeskog might be back for the postseason as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And does this feel like the one team as good as the Nashville Predators have been playing? Is this still like the one team you would absolutely want to avoid at all costs?
For me, it's not even so much about the team as it is about Nathan MacKinnon. Nathan MacKinnon in the playoffs, the way that he's playing this season is just terrifying because there is really nothing that he isn't doing well right now. I mean, he's a Hart. I just don't see how he's not going to win the Hart, but that's a conversation for a whole nother day. The one thing about Colorado, and I agree with you, I think that they are probably the most scary. But the one thing that makes me think, okay, maybe, is that, again, it comes down for me goaltending. Like, is Georgiev the guy? Is he really the guy? I'm not saying that it all comes down to goaltending in the playoffs, because I do think that it's about more than just that. But I do think UC Saros kind of keeps you in a game a little bit better than maybe Georgiev does for the Avalanche. And here's what's true about the Avalanche. Like you said, they're on what I think a 7-game streak. They haven't lost since Nashville beat them. So they are peaking.
Nine straight wins for Colorado.
Yeah, 9 straight. So they are on a roll. They're definitely on a roll. But when every so often Colorado has just a funky, weird game. And if you could catch their funky, weird game where they just don't put it all together, but the next game they're going to put it all together, that may help whoever has to face them in the first round, because they're just that team where they can they remind me of like the class clown who's really smart. Like, they're going to do great, but every so often they like crack a joke or something and everybody kind of laughs at them. But then, they're still going to ace the test. So if Nashville could stay on top of their game, I think Nashville again has a goaltending advantage, but I would prefer not. Yeah. I would just prefer not. The Nathan MacKinnon is a hard pass for me with a side of a hell no. I'd rather not.
Yeah. Don't blame you for wanting to avoid Colorado there.
Yeah.
One other team in this equation that realistically Nashville could play in the first round is a team that is been one of the best in the NHL all season long, and maybe kind of falling down the ladder a little bit in terms of who people are talking about in terms of being a contender, and those are the Vancouver Canucks. We'll talk about them and how the Preds match up with Vancouver coming up here in just a little bit. First, I want to mention today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Regardless of how the Nashville Predators finish this season and regardless of who they play in the first round, you can still win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper's our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Philip Forsberg, Ryan O'Reilly, Nathan MacKinnon, and more will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. If you can correctly predict the outcome of 8 of those player picks, you can win a 100 times bet on Sleeper. You heard me, hockey fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. All right, and let's talk about the Vancouver Canucks for a second. A potential first-round matchup for the Nashville Predators. They are leading the Pacific Division right now. A pretty sizable, but not necessarily a lock lead, 10 points over the Edmonton Oilers right now. But they have been the front runners in that Pacific Division all season long.
Right.
This is a team the Nashville Predators have had a little bit of a tricky history against, especially this season. What do you think, Ann? Is this a team that the Nashville Predators could maybe pull a few upsets or pull maybe some surprises against in the Stanley Cup Finals?
Yeah,
playoffs or whatever.
In the postseason.
In the postseason.
Yeah, at some point. Yeah. You know what? This is a team that I do think Nashville maybe would like a shot at. I think this is you said something really interesting before the break. This was a team that everybody was talking about earlier in the season. This really was the darling of the season. And then just sort of other teams have kind of kicked something in. Vancouver just sort of has not been at the forefront of everybody's mind when you're talking about Stanley Cup contender. You're thinking, Florida. Nobody's really thinking necessarily Vancouver quite as much. And they're a very talented team. Nashville has had some trouble with them this season. You've got Pedersen, and you've got JT Miller, and, you've got pretty good goaltending happening. So, but there is, for some reason, I think, they don't feel quite as daunting to me as a Colorado does. Even though they've got lots of talent, they just don't feel as daunting to me. And I do think it's a team that Nashville could maybe surprise some people in a series with them. I do think Nashville could maybe make a statement in a series with them.
Here's the thing, because you had mentioned, maybe they're not as jazzed up as Colorado or Dallas right now. Is that because of the team, or is this because of maybe just the reputation that they haven't really had as much postseason success as Dallas and Colorado in recent years? And maybe that's why people are overlooking them a little bit.
Yeah, I do think that's probably it. And I think that it's a team going into this season nobody really thought of as, hey, what team's going to be a real good Stanley Cup contender? It's going to be Vancouver. I think that because they surprised some people, I just think people haven't been chewing on it enough. It's not the team that pops into your head at first when you think, even in just straight Western Conference, even though, they're doing so well, you do think of Dallas and Colorado, I think, before you think, or Vegas, before you think of Vancouver. So I do think it's a little bit about reputation, but you can't discount what they've done. And they've had some ups and downs. But overall, this is a team that's been able to consistently put wins together. So I think it is perception, maybe as much as it is reality. But it is a team I would be interested to see Nashville in a series with. What could Nashville do? I think that they are not necessarily a flashy team. I think it's a team that's very much like Nashville in the sense that it's going to be like, a kind of a grinded out series, kind of, you know what I'm saying? Like more of like a blue collar-ish series and not so much flash offensively. So I think it'd be interesting to see them.
There is a lot of speed on that team. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of skill. That is kind of going to be the thing for Nashville, is because, hey, remember the past few years, those are the kind of teams that Nashville never really matched up well against.
Right.
The teams with speed, the teams with skill.
Right.
That is Vancouver in the nutshell. Maybe the one thing working in the Preds' favor in that series is just that, somehow the Nashville Predators still have more postseason experience than almost everybody on that Vancouver roster. They haven't had the deep run with Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson and some others. Nashville, of course, they have guys like Philip Forsberg and Roman Josi, who are in the Stanley Cup Finals, 6 years ago. And they also brought in Ryan O'Reilly and Luke Shen, guys who have just won cups. So maybe if you're looking at that, that is maybe an advantage in the Nashville Predators' favor right there, is that they do have that experience factor over Vancouver. But I don't necessarily think that one's going to be a walk in the park either. But I mean, of those three, Anne, let's go back and bring Colorado and Dallas into this picture. Mm-hmm. Colorado, Dallas, Vancouver. If you were in charge of the matchups and one of those three is in charge, or one of those three faces the Nashville Predators in the first round, who is it in your mind?
I would rather see Dallas. I really would. I would rather see Dallas. And I think it's going to be interesting no matter who Nashville plays, because I think what we really want to see is Nashville in the postseason. You just talked about, Nashville has not always stacked up well against teams with a lot of speed and a lot of skill, but all of a sudden that's Nashville style in a lot of ways. So let's see what can they do, against these teams. But just for me, and probably this is an emotional pick, I just would love to see them play Dallas. And if you're going to get a win out of the first round, let's just beat them.
Is it the 9-2
It's a
lost
little bit
at
benign.
end of the
Like, I'm a
season.
little bitter. I'm a little
Yeah.
bitter.
I was going to ask, is that more symbolic? And it was also, hey, remember the last time the Nashville Predators won a division / were in the top 3 in their division? It was Dallas that knocked them out.
Yeah.
And they were the ones that kind of, sent this, the Preds are on the right track. They're getting close to a Stanley Cup, kind of set that whole thing spiraling back the other way.
Yeah.
And so, there's certainly some history there
Who
between
would
these
you
two
want to
teams.
see? If you could pick, what would be your ideal first round for Nashville? It's
I,
tough.
I would I would say Vancouver.
Yeah.
You just never the thing with I don't want Colorado at all.
No.
Dallas, I can see, especially if the Predators have the goaltending advantage, I can see that going well, but it's also one of those things where it's like you never really know what you're going to get with.
Very true.
Yeah. The Predators against the Canucks, like they lost the series this year, but they looked pretty good in some of the games that they played. I don't know. For me, that's I think the most consistent matchup.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be so interesting to see where this lands because it seems like things are a lock, but there are enough just little moving pieces where, 2.5 weeks from now, it's going to be very interesting to see where all of this lands and who Nashville really faces, which by the way, Andrew Brunette is not even talking about. Andrew Brunette's like, we are just trying to make the playoffs. And I'm like, you've won, you've got a 17 game point streak going. You're 15-0-2, right? And he's like, we're just trying to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Okay, Andrew.
That's a good segue into our next segment because look, the Nashville Predators, things are a little bit different now than where they were about a month ago. There's a little bit more pressure on them, a little bit more expectation. How are the Nashville Predators handling it? And how is Andrew Brunette adjusting his coaching style to match where the Predators are right now? That's a topic of conversation we'll have next.
First, want to let you know that if you are watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day long, you may want to just turn down the volume on all that shouting. We have an alternative for you. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news. It's streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, let's talk about tonight's game and with the Vegas Golden Knights. Remember, these two teams played a month ago. Nashville Predators beat Vegas in Vegas. That was the famed U2 failed road trip, whatever you want to call it. It was
beer trip, yes.
Yeah, it was the second game of the Nashville Predators' current 17-game point streak. It was kind of, a lot of people looked at it as, okay, maybe the Nashville Predators can get up for a big opponent and maybe go face to face with some really good players.
Mm-hmm.
So, is this where the Nashville Predators continue the streak in, or is this Vegas coming hard for revenge?
This is going to be such an interesting game because, and this is a sentence I did not anticipate saying at the beginning of the season, but these two teams are actually very similar in a lot of ways. And so it's going to be interesting to see how it shifts out. As far as goals scored on the season, there's a very small gap between Vegas and Nashville. When it comes to goals scored against, almost identical record, very similar records on the power play. Vegas is at 19%, Nashville's at 20%. The penalty kill percentage is very similar. Predators have gone 15-0-2, of course, in the last 17, but Vegas's record, not as great. They've gone 7-9-1 in their last 17. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see. And remember that this is the second game on a 4-game road trip for Vegas. They played last night against the St. Louis Blues. So this is the second game of back-to-back. I feel like This is one that Nashville has got to get ready for. This is
Mhm.
not going to be an easy game. There are no easy games, but this one is especially challenging. But I like the way Nashville is matching up based on how each team is playing right now. So this is doable,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I agree, and it's going to take a lot, for Nashville to pull it off because Vegas does have, some good players right
Yeah.
now. Jack Eichel is kind of starting to hit his stride again. But, this is a really good chance, I think, for Nashville to kind of show up and prove that they can go toe to toe with the defending Stanley Cup champions. That this isn't just a fluke. That they
Right.
have guys like Philip Forsberg and Ryan O'Reilly and Roman Yossi that can outplay somebody like Jack Eichel. So this is to me is going to be a big moment for the Nashville Predators. Let's talk about preparing for this
Mm,
game though, Anne, because it's a little bit different when you're, I guess, when you have the target on your back.
100%.
It's a little bit different coaching a team with, nothing to lose and are just kind of going on vibes right now. It's another thing to coach a team that is at this point not only expected to make the playoffs, but maybe starting to flirt with a dangerous team kind of status at the moment. So if you're Andrew Brunette, what changes do you have to do, adjustments do you have to make now as opposed to where you were as a team a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, this is a very different opportunity for Andrew Brunette coaching wise. And I got a chance to ask him, are you coaching the team differently now? What are you doing differently as a coach with a team that is on a run like they are, as opposed to the team that you wanted to get to this point? And it was such an interesting and well thought out answer from Andrew Brunette. But one of the things that he said is that it's a different set of challenges because when you're winning, sometimes you have to correct more. When you're losing, it's maybe take the foot off the gas a little bit and let them play. And I
Mhm.
thought that was so interesting because you would almost think if you're winning, you coach less. Wait, they're doing something good. But his point as he went on to talk about this is he was saying, when you're winning, you may take the W as the evaluation of your performance when really you have to dig in and you have to look even more closely at the video, at individual plays, at individual players, at positioning, because the W may make you feel like, hey, we must be doing everything right. And you can maybe get a little bit careless about it. And so he actually is maybe coaching more, looking more, instead of just kind of saying to the players, which I think there were definitely times this season where he would say to them, just go out and play hockey
Yeah.
because they were kind of just struggling so much. And you just sort of say, go play hockey. But now it's just become, I think, more coaching because they're winning. And I think that's definitely a unique challenge to the situation that Nashville's in and what Andrew Brunette has to do to keep this going for them.
You have to nitpick a little bit
Yes,
more, it
that's
feels
it.
like. And, not everybody likes that with a young team. Of course, we've seen maybe some casualties of people that the Nashville Predators would like to see up and develop a little bit more, maybe getting some more ice time. Also, guys like Cody Glass kind of, been a healthy scratch lately. But, it's a different coaching style, and you can see it sort of transition during this stretch where the Nashville Predators are looking around and saying, we might have something here.
Hmm.
Like, who knows what's going to have happen next year? Maybe we're not built exactly for long-term success the way we want it right now. But the way things are going and the way this team is gelling, we may have something right this very second. And so we kind of have to nurture that because we've
Yes.
said it before, and you never really know um, when what kind of chance you have in the postseason. I mean, look, Ottawa Senators were one goal away from facing the Nashville Predators in the Stanley Cup Finals in 2017, lost in a Game 7 overtime to Pittsburgh in the Eastern Conference Finals. They've never been back to the playoffs since. You
Right.
just never know when your last chance is. So if you're the Nashville Predators, I feel like you do kind of have to maybe nitpick a little bit more and go all in
Yeah.
on getting the team there this year.
Yeah. And I think you can tend to, I think it's just human nature. When you're doing well, you tend to think I'm good. And you have to remember, I need to be better. And the one thing I will say is that kind of the general vibe around this team is not one of overconfidence. You know, they're aware of the streak, they're aware of the numbers. I think that they were definitely committed. Colton Sissons said, you know, look, we really knew when it was the franchise one, like we really wanted that bad. And we're aware of the number, but we're really focused on what do we have to do minute to minute in the game. And I think that that mindset has been very helpful for the Nashville Predators, that they're not just like, hey, we're a good team now. They're looking at how do we get better. And I think that's made a lot of difference for this streak being as long as it is.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the Nashville Predators can ride this out, because not only do they have to get to the playoffs, they have to make sure they can continue this momentum throughout the regular season. I think to have a real shot in doing something in the playoffs as well. Preds versus Vegas tonight is a 7:00 Central puck drop in Bridgestone Arena. We will have a recap of that game coming up for you tomorrow. And where can people find your work?
You can find my work online at Penalty Box Radio. You can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice.
You can find me at Penalty Box Radio or follow me on social at _NS Morgan. That's going to do it for us on today's Locked on Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Back tomorrow with an all-new episode. We'll see you then.